What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tuesday Triggers podcast. I don't know if anyone ever actually watches this on YouTube, but this is the intro. Today we have on Kellen Casebeer, a dear friend of mine, and absolutely, undoubtedly, one of the most intelligent people in the sales enablement, lead gen, whatever you want to call it, space. Kellen has been putting out content for so many years, and I think was one of the original, influencers and content creators, or at least of the first generation, right?
Certainly,
Now we're
yeah.
on like generation 2, generation
Totally.
3. Like now I'm catching on. If I'm catching on, it's certainly like a few generations behind. But anyways, super stoked to have you on, brother, and I would love for you to do a little intro of yourself.
Yeah. What's up? Good to be here, bro. Awesome to
Thanks.
finally be doing this one. So my name's Kellen Casebeer. I run the Deal Lab. We are a B2B growth agency. That's the easiest way I describe the general blanket of things that we can all do these days, right? So we're Clay certified expert, Smart Lead certified expert, all the good stuff. Work with a bunch of these cool companies. Stoked to like many, I'm kind of under the Jesse Ola umbrella of lead gen businesses. And so it's
There's a lot of them, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally, dude. I'm actually doing a show with him tomorrow, and it's funny because like the people build it as like X2X SDRs turned successful entrepreneur, and I'm like that. I don't know. It's like that's an interesting tag. It's like you're reading about yourself, and it's funny doing it with Jesse. Where like to me, I'm like, yo, that's the guy like I learned from. But yeah,
dude, it's crazy. I mean, it was like maybe like 20 or I don't know. I think I joined Jesse's group and there was like 20 or 50 people or something. And we look at that. I was just talking with Taylor Heron the other day, and he's like, "Dude, I have a $3 million agency in a span of a year, and I didn't know shit about shit like 2 years ago." And Jesse brought this community together, and of all of these people that were smart and doing cool shit, but doing it on an island and had no idea, like there wasn't a community. There was like no place to talk about this stuff, and so we all put all of us in a room. And of course, some crazy cool shit happened. So,
yeah, I was on a call the other day with some various like Clay user people, and someone was like complaining about the speed of something, and I was like, guys, can we just pause for a minute and think about how crazy it is that we have a bunch of like sales bros on here complaining about API call speed? I'm like, this is like such a crazy experience compared to what this stuff was 2 years ago for me or whatever.
Totally, it's crazy, and you've built your own community too. So, that being said, tell me, like, let's talk a little bit more about all of the many things that you do at the Deal Lab.
Yeah. So the main thing is sort of around this idea of like message market fit, right? And so prior to this role, I actually used to work for that company, Apex Revenue. I was like their first fractional like VP of sales person in this model that they used to sell, doing fractional head of sales. And so basically, in that model, we were doing these projects where it's like setting up a tech stack, mapping out someone's market, their positioning. We were helping them hire someone. We're coming up with metrics. We were like training that person. We were sort of coaching the founders on like how to lead sales teams. And 2/3 of the time, these projects would go like great, sort of like as advertised. And about a third of the time, it would be what I call like an uphill pipeline environment, where it was sort of like you could take the market, you could do what you do to them. We go talk to these people, and it doesn't move the market, right? And what I would observe, especially a lot of these were like agency businesses or something, where it's like they have product market fit. They have customers, $3 million EBITDA, like happy people, but you go say what you do to the market and it sort of fell on deaf ears. And so I started running into a situation where like I kind of needed more granularity into how we were approaching, like, what is the market? Who are we reaching out to? What are we saying to these people? And as I sort of went down this rabbit hole of like, what does it look like to really R&D, like what messaging resonates with the market? I came up with a model that I thought made so much sense. I was like, I'm just going to go do this. And so it sort of started out as like validating messaging and chronologically preceding the idea of like spinning up a sales team. And I figured it brought the benefit of lead gen, which is sort of like speed, agility, like expertise, scale, but I could sort of bill it as like this R&D motion that was a little bit less pegged to some of the things that like traditional lead gen can sort of be a frustration to be on the hook for on like a 3 time span or whatever.
Well aware of that.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel you. Who's your ideal client?
Yeah, yeah. So, it's funny, like what I tell people, you're supposed to have like a real buttoned up version of this. For me, it's just people want to do like really, really good outbound,
Yeah.
and part of what I think that looks like is like the ethos of caring about like the form that they take to do these things, And so for us, like I do not compete in the market of like trying to squeeze the most like value per dollar at some low price point type thing. I'm not the most automated business. I'm pretty hands on. I do a lot of like very nitty gritty sort of like market research and like writing type, So point is, we work well with someone who's like really excited to get real deep on the market segmentation side and run some nice tests and sort of like walk away with an understanding of what may or may not work. Um, I tell our prospects, like, if that sounds super exciting, like, you're probably talking to the right people. If you're like, what the hell are you saying? Like, you'd probably go talk to one.
Yeah. If you're looking at like a CPL metric and how many emails were sent, and it's just probably not the right fit, right? Because it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of it's like hiring like an artist versus an engineer. You got to have a little trust in the process at the and enter it knowing like, hey, we're gonna try and create something really amazing here.
Yeah. It's almost like, I like the artist analogy, like a tattoo artist where it's like, I might know I'm real good, but like, if this is going to be on someone forever, like, it's like, even if I'm technically good, but I'm like, yo, you like a different art style than what I do. It's like, I'm not going to try to like get the,
Right.
yeah.
I love it. That's a good analogy. Um, awesome, man. Awesome. What do you see in the market right now?
Yeah. I think, deliverability hell. No.
That's
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I think I actually have been in a lot of ways grateful for like the deliverability stuff right now, because it's I think one of the problems with a lot of what we do, all of us, has been that like the table stake at the way I put it is like table stakes have been rising, right? Of like what it looks like to even like sort of show up and compete. And I think for a long time, I know at least my business, I purposefully insulated my clients, right? And so it's sort of like, you could sell against, hey, I'm going to make this easy. They know that there's some like setup stuff, but it wasn't like, here's what's going on. It was like, you don't want to know this stuff. I'm going to handle this. I got you. And what I found is just that I think, it's like that'll help you land deals and like, and, you'll do some good business and stuff. But I think that as those table stakes become higher and higher to do anything, it makes less and less sense to sort of like spin up and spin down on like a 60-day, 90-day window. And I think because of these new barriers, it's easier to point and like show prospects and clients this stuff and be like, this is what we're going to be doing, and this is some of the volatility to it. And like, you stretch it out on this timeline, and like, these are the types of things we think can happen. You shrink it to this, and like, God knows what's going to happen. And I've just found that like, it's scary, as a business owner to be like, let's let them under the hood a little bit and talk about some
Yeah.
of the like issues. But I've actually been, I think it'll, I think like a lot of us like these issues, it'll strengthen my business, because it's like, okay, cool. What does it look like to get kicked in the teeth a little? What does it look like to overcome this? And on the other side of that, so far I'm liking what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I agree. This has been this last month has been pretty brutal. And fortunately we've forged strong client relationships, but transparency is key, man. Like this is and letting people under the hood and building that trust. It's like even this space, like building your influence on LinkedIn and stuff. You gotta like share some of the sauce
Yeah.
to build that trust and understand that like, look, I know what I'm doing, but there are these variables that are out of my control, and so we've certainly been feeling it. The previous like in June we didn't have like we were fully insulated. In February we were insulated, but this one I think I don't know anyone that's like, no, I'm good. This was
Yeah.
this was a cakewalk, but so that transparency really helps. Let's say a client were to come to you tomorrow, and they're like a new business and they're selling some B2B SaaS software. What would be the process that you would go through to like help them, knock it out of the park?
Yeah. So, I would, to me, I'm always starting with to me, like the two like competing like feedback loops that go on basically are like go to market back to like what your product is. And then it's like like on the go-to-market side, right? And then the product side of that, which is like receiving feedback and like doing what you're going to do, right? And so I think to me, the like lead gen or like outbound feedback loops are valuable as early as you are able to, willing to sort of like take the truth that the market gives you and sort of leverage it, right? And so I worked with people that were really early stage where things were awesome, where the expectation is less around commercialization and more around like sort of proof of concept and market fit. And I think that is an awesome place to start. Sometimes people are a little bit further along, right? Where they maybe have a bit of revenue, they maybe have inbound or whatever. But either way, to me, the process is basically like start with understanding. The way I put it is like the market exists without you, right? So it's like remove yourself, your business from the market. And if you were to observe this from the outside, like how do they group themselves? What are they working to accomplish? What are the challenges that they have? You know, how would they sort of like natively talk about those challenges? And I think that's an important starting point because everything else is like in the context of that versus, you know, in a like, isolated by itself. Then to me, it's always like pull a really wide market, right? So I like sort of high recall, sort of maximize the reach. I would whittle that down, right? Using like clay and stuff. And so basically maximize the amount you start with, whittle it down. I really, you know, I do a lot of work making like custom segmentation where it's sort of like uh, building out custom attributes against these different segments of the market that might change how we can communicate to them. That is different than what you get out of like the Apollos and the Zoom Infos of the world. You know, so I think there's this world like define your market, segment it in a way that is inherently proprietary to you, and then enrich it with sort of data that is again proprietary to that lens in the first place. Um, Once you have that, I would pull, you know, like the personas and clump them, you know, not necessarily title, but by sort of like jobs that they're focused on doing. And then I test stuff basically. So if you map out like the markets, the segments, the personas in those segments, and then the angles to those personas in the segments of those markets, you'll have this big matrix of different campaign combos that you can run of an angle to a persona in a segment of the market. And so I think if you're 0 to 1, you know, it's sort of like map that stuff out, start what you think is most likely to work, but just understand there's a lot more variability to sort of like what a campaign can be than people realize. And I think allowing yourself to go a little slow to test a little bit on the front end so that the things that you do in the future are sort of based on like an actual like comparative analysis versus just like, man, my gut said this is, you know, which can perform great. But I just so infrequently see people who have real data and real like measurability around
Right.
market fit stuff. So people have this like mono idea of like, this is who we serve, this is what we do. Very rarely is it like, here's how
Is it right?
they are.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So if you do that grid, right? Let's say it's a 3x3 grid, right? So we got our 9 boxes. You try your 9, you like, you know, get it down to 9 segments and you run that test. What would be like the right amount of, I mean, again, everyone's TAM is different, but what would be like enough data for you to be like, okay, this is a pretty good test? Is that like 2,000 per each one of those blocks? Get like 18,000 contacts run through sequences to try and understand if this and get a little bit more data, or
Yeah, I put it like it's not for me, it's not like a specific number. There's a couple of things that I'm like really paying attention to, right? The first one is like qualitative, what I call awful replies. Basically, like I'm always paying attention to, is there any element of what I'm, you know, because you're always going to get some awful replies and you're always going to get some bad replies, but it's sort of like, do any of these people think I'm an idiot for saying what I'm saying? You know, and I'm always like paying attention to like, is there anything that like we really missed the mark on? And I think that's like, because if I see that at all, it's kind of like pull it and like, what assumption did we like totally miss on?
yeah,
Besides that though, to me, like I always tell clients, I think it's all super relative, like so relative. Where you'll have, you know, I've had clients that were getting, you know, 10 meetings a month, and they were like, yeah, this sucks. And then you'll have a client that's like getting like a meeting a month, and is super happy, you know. And I think it just so much depends on one, what the like deal values are and things like that, and then two, I also think it's has a bit to do with like what you're competing against, you know, because like the one that was getting 10, their founder produces like an insane inbound funnel where it's sort of like we're paying like a little bit of a premium for like a negligible percentage of our total, total leads produced. Like, why would we do this? It's kind of like, okay, like I understand that thinking. Other businesses have huge revenue teams no one knows how to produce a meeting out of, and that meeting a month is like the life blood or whatever. So
For sure.
yeah, so I think that it's like it's super relative. For me it's like you're always just trying to improve the the algorithm, so to speak. And so I think it's about like just being really honest with, are there actually levers to pull here? It's kind of like, don't just spin up the same thing over and over. So if you have a meaningful lever to adjust, like maybe there's optimization to be had. But also I think more often than not, people are just kind of seeing like the reasonable appetite from the market and trying to figure out like some crazy way to hack through that.
So this goes kind of against what you said, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes I think of a question like before I get to it, and then I'm like, well, it's here, so I'm saying it.
Yeah.
Because you just said like basically don't go this route. But like what is like one banger sequence or kind of play or whatever that like at the very least works really well for you and your clients? Might be a little bit like a secret saucey type of thing, but like it's something that can help people flesh this out that might be worth like, hey, you should go try and figure out how to do this.
Yeah, let me think about this. And you're saying like to spin up campaigns and figure out what works?
I don't know. No, we can go down any route here. What is one thing that you think people should go out and test and try and do right
Okay,
now?
yeah.
Because
So
you think it's a really banging
yeah, I think right
campaign or
now,
idea.
honestly, what I've been calling it is like spamming your offer, which sounds funny because spam and like offer are both kind of like spam words right now. But like I've been like, if I have a client, we had a client that had like wasn't going great, and we told them like, hey, we think you should make some of these changes. And they're awesome. They're like, yeah, I agree. We should kind of go back to the drawing board on what their offer is and sort of what they can bring to the market to begin with. And we took that idea and we just like sent it to people saying, hey, if I did this, and literally it was like, hey, name, if I could, very, very specific thing at no cost, would you let me follow up when it's ready? We're thinking sometime early 2025, trying to gauge interest or something like that. And we'd had like a handful of positive replies over months, and we got like 20 in like 2 weeks. I mean, it was just like, and so then I took some of our other clients, ones that were kind of performing, ones that weren't, and I just started like really leaning heavily into sort of like, what is the most palatable way to just spam this offer at someone's face, just like face value, just throw it at them. And I found across the board right now that's performing really well.
I'm gonna ask you about this
Yeah.
later, so
Yeah.
we're gonna have to come back to this.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm gonna ask you about this after the call.
Yeah.
Because that's really dope. I'm super like down for that,
Cool.
and I think that would be really great for a couple of our clients, and I think
Yeah.
that'd be really great.
It's
for
really
us.
good too. Like where I love it is especially like if you have a client that's having a hard time, where it's kind of like if they're a little like bummed, and you're like, look, you don't want to, it's kind of like you don't want to give away this for free or like a lot, because a lot of times there's a little bit of this friction of like, but to me, it's like if you think there is anything to this, they should eat it up. And so throw it at them. Let's figure it out, because it's like so valuable to know either they eat it up for free and we're solving for like opportunity generation, or if it's just like they just don't care. And if they don't care and you're sitting there optimizing little things, like, oh my God, you're just, you're doomed. And so I think just being like, how quick can we just like,
Yeah, just get it out there. Just spam your offer.
Yep.
That's really dope. So let me ask you this: what's your like most used clay flow, and what's your best or like craziest clay table?
Yeah. And crazy one like gives me all sorts of like weird flashbacks to different various ideas. Like everyone else has done something weird. But okay, so I think the best one, let me think about it. I mean, I think the best one is like this RSS thing that I built. The first, like, it's the thing that I appreciate the most. Like, it just comes to mind because I had a client who is in a tough market that knows it's hard to generate opportunity. They're like enterprise IT healthcare consultants. And so they work with like huge hospital systems, and it's like reach out to the VP of IT and the CISO and like talk to them about like training their people. And what I mean? It's like very like, and there's a lot of different people that do it. And the company love them, but they're not that great with like wanting to give good offers. It's kind of like
Yeah.
we want these boring consulting sales calls.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were working with them for a while, and like we had some like okay months, but like it was a kind of, that anyone who runs lead gen, it's like as soon as they get, the way I see it is like as soon as they give you money, you're getting fired until you overcome that. And we weren't in the green yet, and so we're kind of like, okay, basically trying to figure out how to preserve a client. And I had this idea of sort of trying to like hack what like lead gen is. We're going like, how can we, and it's a lot of the same thinking around like signals and triggers. It literally is like signal and trigger, but it was sort of like, instead of buying or subscribing to like a built thing, it's trying to sort of like go meta on it and be like, what do these things represent to the market? And what is some of the why is there a lift to like if someone changes jobs and things like that, with the idea being like add some immediacy to like the feedback loop and maybe try to even find. And so what we ended up doing was finding people either doing podcast interviews or writing blogs and stuff like that in the space. And we subscribed to a bunch of different sources that might have a couple of these. And so it's kind of like a trickle. But every time one of these things pushes, we would like bring it into Clay, scrape it, summarize it, analyze it, and extract like the people, either the people doing it or the businesses being talked about or the concept being talked about, and tie it to businesses. But basically we just created this flow that like would automatically take things happening in any given market and basically like turn it into like a signal to outreach. And as soon as we started doing this, it just massively insanely improved responsiveness and like positive reply rate through this. We're not even sending the emails on these, like we're handing these off to, it's actually funny, we hand them to a rep who just takes our AI email and like copy paste it. But like the whole, the whole company is changing like how they're going to market based off this thing. And so it was a little bit of like a desperate Hail Mary, but like they've extended with us and they've like expanded with us. And so to me, it's like the best because it's relatively simple. It does.
Well, let's do that. Let's talk about
Yeah.
the RSS flow.
Yeah. Cool. Like the nitty gritty of it or what?
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't need to get nitty gritty, but like let the people like understand what it is, right?
Yeah. So basically RSS is this, it's like a technology protocol that like exists. It's a way of like pushing streams or content, right? And so these podcasts push via RSS, blogs push via RSS. Like
For those that don't know, RSS feeds were like the shit in like 2016 or
Yeah.
something. It was
Yeah, I
like
feel like
you can get your RSS feed in your Mozilla Firefox browser,
Yep.
and everyone that does this type of category. So basically, you can verticalize signals. You can say, "Hey, I want to follow this RSS feed on, I don't know, technology updates or
Yep.
something."
Yeah, like Hacker News hiring, right? Like Y
Yeah.
Combinator, all that type of stuff. And so you subscribe to these, and I think part of what's good is like it's a piece of the like RSS is like a non like there's not advertisements in it. It's this very basic like in like kind of objective information flow. And so Play lets you subscribe to these for free.
Right.
I think even on like the basic plans. And so basically what you can do is you can find either blogs or podcasts that update frequently or that like sort of push a lot, or you can just aggregate a bunch that don't push that often. But essentially you just have to build a workflow in Clay that's like signal comes in, maybe like a Zenro scrape, like scrape the link. Generally you need to like program these, you need to have some semblance of an idea of like what the content's going to be in order to like sort of prompt against it. But usually it's sort of like, look at what's being talked about in this article, like extract any specific business names, extract any specific people names, and then also sort of like what is the general like concept to IT here, right? So now you have this like brief. Then off of those people, you'll go match the people and stuff, and like presumably you're trying to find like, head of IT at Stanford who was interviewed talking about like AI's impact in surgery, right? Something like that. And so you have the summary of his talk. You have like this person. I'll take their LinkedIn profile in this and like create a summary off of that too. And then we'll create like AI outreach. That's basically like, hey, Christian, I saw you've been in the, IT like surgery tech field for three dozen years. Was listening to your podcast on health system CIO talking about how like AI, like amputation software is vulnerable to like blah, 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 blah. Really liked your point about thing, like, you know, wondering if, and we make our CTA, like, if I called you with 15 minutes of questions related to like extrapolation of main idea, would you be open to the conversation? Right. And so the whole ethos of it is like, not necessarily trying to say like, hey, you wrote this article, I know you want to buy my thing, but it's almost like, hey, you're in the space and like I'm almost like a nerd for the stuff in the space, and I saw you put out this cool content. And like the whole idea being anyone who takes time to do content, you know, if you kind of like, if you're like the first person to be like, hey, I saw you do this thing, this is, you know, like they're gonna love you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so and what's cool about the RSS stuff is because it's like a push for when it releases, and this flow drops really quickly, it's like right away. And so you're
Instant.
basically hitting them up as their like podcast drops or as this article drops, and you're going like, yo, I saw you were talking about blah blah blah. And so people just love it. I mean, it's just like, it's super basic. It's, you know, I think the biggest criticism is like, it's less of like, hey, are you trying to buy XYZ? And it's a little bit, but the whole point is a lot of markets, it's like, you just need to figure out how to know a couple more people in your, you know, it might be a long, ugly sales funnel that people don't want. But I just think for a lot of people, it's like, I know for our client, they're real happy. You know, I mean, it's like, they're like, how can we do this with more things? How can we do this with more verticals? You know, so I think for a lot of businesses, to me, the way I see it, it's automatic. So it's like, set this up on the side. Like, this is supplementary to every other thing that you could ever do, because it's just so specific, so narrow. And I think, you know, market likes it.
I love it, man.
One last thing on it actually is, by doing this, you also get this research against like the aggregation of what's being talked about in the space, because you're
Yeah.
subscribing to all these like articles.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's awesome. We're 2 minutes late for our other session,
Yeah.
so let's jump.
Let's jump.
I will see you in a second, brother.
Sick.
Peace.